There was a time when boredom was normal. Waiting in line, sitting on a train, lying on your bed doing nothing. You stared at ceilings, you watched clouds, you let your mind wander. Now, you reach for your phone before you even realize you're bored. You scroll, you refresh, you check something. You open something else, you fill the space. Silence feels uncomfortable. Stillness feels restless. And you tell yourself it's just habit. But it's not just habit. It's avoidance. Modern life has made it nearly impossible to sit with your own mind. Not because you're weak, not because you lack discipline, because distraction is always available. And when distraction is always available, emotion gets postponed. When was the last time you sat in complete silence without reaching for input? No music, no podcast, no scrolling, no background noise. Just you. For many people, that feels almost threatening. Not because silence is loud, but because silence reveals. When the noise stops, something surfaces. Unfinished thoughts, lingering regret, subtle dissatisfaction, questions you've been postponing, conversations you've been avoiding, decisions you know you need to reconsider. Stillness doesn't create anxiety, it exposes it. And most of us were never taught how to sit with discomfort. We were taught how to escape it. Feel stressed? Open something. Feel lonely? Message someone. Feel uncertain? Research something. Feel bored? Consume something. The solution to discomfort has become stimulation. But stimulation doesn't resolve emotion. It suppresses it. There's a psychological term for this: experiential avoidance. It's the habit of avoiding internal experiences, thoughts, emotions, sensations, even when avoidance creates long-term cost. And here's the part most people don't realize. Avoidance can look productive. You answer emails, you reorganize your space, you optimize your schedule, you start another task, you multitask. But busyness can be emotional insulation. Because as long as you're doing, you're not sitting. And sitting is where clarity lives. Now add neuroscience to this. Every notification, every refresh, every new piece of content triggers a small dopamine response. Not pleasure, anticipation. Your brain begins expecting novelty. When novelty becomes constant, your baseline shifts. Silence doesn't feel neutral anymore. It feels like withdrawal. Your nervous system has been trained to expect input. So when input stops, restlessness begins. Not because something is wrong, because your stimulation threshold is elevated. This is why you can feel exhausted at night, but still scroll for another hour. Because stopping means feeling, and feeling means confronting. There's another layer beneath this. From a young age, many of us were conditioned to associate stillness with laziness, idle hands, wasted time, unproductive, unambitious. We were praised for doing, for achieving, for staying busy, rarely for reflecting. So even as adults, stillness can trigger guilt. If I'm not doing something, I'm falling behind. That guilt makes silence uncomfortable, so you fill it. And over time, the inability to sit still becomes identity. I'm just someone who needs to stay busy, but constant busyness often masks unprocessed emotion. Because when you slow down, unresolved feelings surface. Small disappointments, old embarrassment, career doubts, relational confusion, unspoken resentment, grief you never processed properly. They don't disappear. They wait, and the longer they wait, the heavier they feel, which makes stillness even harder. So you avoid it again. Distraction, relief, avoidance, accumulation, restlessness. The cycle strengthens. Now imagine this pattern continuing for years. You never pause long enough to question your direction. You stay in the job that drains you because you're too distracted to evaluate it. You remain in dynamics that feel off because you never sit long enough to admit it. You chase stimulation instead of meaning. You confuse activity with progress. And eventually, something catches up. Not dramatically, quietly. A vague dissatisfaction you can't explain. A restlessness that doesn't go away. A feeling that you're moving but not arriving. You lose depth, not intelligence. Not competence, depth. Your thoughts become reactive instead of reflective. You consume more than you integrate. You move forward without processing. And eventually, life feels slightly disconnected. You're functioning, but not grounded. You're informed, but not aligned. You're active, but not clear. Because clarity requires pauses. Without pauses, you drift. You might notice this in subtle ways. You make decisions quickly just to move on. You avoid revisiting uncomfortable topics. You prefer constant background noise. You struggle to fully relax without stimulation. You feel restless even during downtime. This isn't weakness. It's overstimulation. And overstimulation narrows emotional tolerance. But here's the deeper truth. The thing you're avoiding in stillness is often the thing that would move you forward. That uncomfortable thought? It's probably pointing to change. That boredom? It's creative space. That settled dissatisfaction? It's feedback. But feedback only arrives when noise lowers. You don't need dramatic detox. You don't need to delete everything. You need micro-stillness. 5 minutes without input. A short walk without headphones. Driving without background noise. Sitting without filling space. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. That's recalibration. Your stimulation baseline is lowering. Your nervous system is adjusting. And slowly, something shifts. Thoughts slow down. Emotion becomes manageable instead of overwhelming. You begin noticing patterns instead of reacting to impulses. You begin connecting dots. You begin realizing what you've been postponing. And recognition is power. Stillness is not laziness. It's integration. It's where your experiences organize themselves. It's where insight forms. It's where intention becomes clear. You don't avoid stillness because you're incapable. You avoid it because you're protecting yourself from discomfort. But discomfort isn't danger. It's information. And the more you practice sitting with it, the less threatening it becomes. You don't need constant stimulation to survive. You need tolerance for your own mind. Because when you never sit still, you never integrate. And when you never integrate, you drift. There's something else worth noticing. When you can't sit still, you also can't fully feel joy, because joy requires presence, and presence requires space. If your mind is constantly reaching for the next input, the next distraction, the next notification, you never fully land where you are. You're always slightly ahead of yourself. That's why even good moments can feel thin. You're at dinner, but checking your phone. You're on a walk, but listening to something. You finish a task and immediately open another. Completion doesn't register. Satisfaction doesn't settle. Your nervous system never closes the loop, and over time life starts feeling like a series of unfinished moments. Not because nothing meaningful is happening, but because you're never still long enough to absorb it. Stillness doesn't just expose discomfort. It deepens experience. Without it, everything becomes surface level. Maybe the restlessness you feel isn't about needing more. Maybe it's about avoiding something quieter. Maybe the clarity you want is on the other side of 10 uncomfortable minutes. Maybe the life you want requires silence first. Maybe it's time to stop escaping your own mind. Maybe it's time to shift the story.